Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to Unbearable 73. So sometimes I feel that I'm contrarian by nature. It could be my Sicilian heritage, or it could just be growing up in New Jersey. It tends to inbreed a lot of asshole in all of us, you know. I don't actively resist. Well, I should say I do actively resist the tendency to offer corrections when others make like factual errors. But honestly, it irks me. Not that it's that people need to be proven wrong, but on a certain kind of level, underlying level, in my own mental health, mental psyche type of thing, I'm almost obsessed with the actual valid information being out there, and every little instance of an incorrect data or a false data that someone says. Like if someone says, World War II started in 1904, that's obviously not the case. I would want to correct that so that because there might be one person out of the millions who could hear that who might make that mistake, and it might mess up their something they do in life. Maybe they screw up a test at school, or maybe they have a misconception. I remember one of my relatives had the misguided misconception about World War II that the Japanese attacked us because we stopped buying oil from them. Okay, just as an example, So it's not so much that I want to prove someone wrong, but that I want to erase the wrong information. Okay? Now, if you're wondering why I always are interested, why this is like a core concept to me, years ago I read a lot of Nietzsche or Nietzsche, however you want to say it, and all that he wrote. He wrote a lot of stuff. There are a couple of passages that have stuck with me. I think about every day of my life sometimes, and here's two of them that I'm paraphrasing and cutting down just so you can get the point of it. Okay? An evil deed is like a boil. You can see it, you can feel it. It stands there proudly displaying itself for all to see. But a bad thought is like a tiny little fungi. Unless you actively look for it, you'll never notice it. Maybe you get a little itch and you think, a mosquito bit me or something, But if you don't keep looking for those little fungi, sooner or later you'll find you're covered completely in fungus. Now this one, at least in the sense I'm using here, means that evil can screw things up, but so can bad ideas and incorrect information if they accumulate. And the other teaching from Nietzsche is the purpose of being human to think, but that doesn't mean that one will always or even ever think correctly. This one's more straightforward, and basically it's a warning that you'll always have to be thinking. Since you're always going to be thinking no matter what you can do, you better make sure that you're processing facts and using logic and rationality and positive, constructive thought to do that thinking, and not reinforcing incorrect information or misconceptions or propaganda. Yeah. So let's. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness came out, the next MCU movie. I can say a lot of stuff about this movie. There's probably thousands of videos by now that mention that how Doctor Strange wasn't even the star of his own movie, how it's full of bad writing, just taking you from action set piece or special effect to the next action set piece or special effect. You might recall that Doctor Strange 2, Spider-Man Far From Home, the failed Eternals movie, and Captain America Civil War, they're really just team-up movies. They had less to do with their primary characters, Legendarium from Marvel, and more to do with selling as many toys as possible, for as many characters as possible, as much merchandise as possible, and of course, Marxist propaganda. All that, rather than anything else, in particular as relates to the character. And so Doctor Strange recently suffered a 65% approximately drop-off in its second week. Now, when discussing that, several people on a recent live stream on Salty Texas's channel used the concept of pendulum swinging. Okay, now, before I get into slight sciencey stuff, so you understand something about me, I think entirely in like moving pictures and words, or multimedia video, if you want to think of it that way. It's like most, from my understanding, 98% or more people think in words. So if you're thinking about a book title, like say, War and Peace, the words War and Peace go through your head. In my head, War and Peace, the image of one of the images of the novel, I saw it, an image of the author pops up in my head, images of stuff from the novel, instances in the novel start flashing through my head. To actually get the words War and Peace in my head, I have to actively replay me looking at the title, or I have to imagine giant bubble letters forming specifically. Okay, everything is like that for me. If you ask me what I ate for dinner, a couple hours ago, I'm in my head replaying me eating some pizza, like what I did then. I'm not thinking the word pizza or me eating pizza. I'm replaying the imagery of me eating pizza. And when I tell you about it, I'm describing what I did, So just bear it in mind when I talk about some of the stuff I'm about to get into, that my first instinct when people try to use a concept to describe something is the visual image it projects. Okay, so now because of that, I mean, one of the areas of mathematics always interested me back. Like now I just work in IT. I haven't done real math in like 20 years. Okay, so one of the areas of mathematics that interested me was using math to model stuff. I thought it was kind of neat when I was a little kid and learned that you can use the Pythagorean theorem to make sure that, say, because I grew up in the construction industry, and what I didn't even know it was called the Pythagorean theorem. I walked up and I said to one of my uncles, like, why are you using Pythagoras there? I was like, well, and he broken Italian. He was like, this is how you make the walls straight on the plan. He showed, and you can take the measurements in the real world and make sure they are the same and that they correspond. If you get what I'm saying. So let's first look at on Salty's channel. Someone said use the concept of pendulum swinging. So let's get a little graph up here. Okay. I'll move. Oops, grab the wrong thing. I wrecked it. Let's move that to the front. Okay. Front and center for now. So this is a simple pendulum with some mathematical mock-up, so to speak. This is more of a physics diagram, if you want to think of it, right? Now, you'll notice it has a particular shape. If you look at the shape, if you follow the image, so to speak, there's an equilibrium position, and then there's a smooth arc that's identical going both ways, right? And this is an example of a parabola. Okay, it's a particular shape, right? Now, the equilibrium position is the point of inflection of the parabola, which is the significant point where something changes. Okay, meaning at one point the parabola is swooping this way, and it's going to keep swooping out. It hits that point of inflection, then it's going to swoop in the other way. Okay, but it's never going to go in here, and it's only either going to change here or go these two ways. Never going to do anything else. Okay? One point of inflection. Now, what is this? How does this apply in terms of use? In practicality, people use this to describe the situation we face in cultural terms, with the deconstruction, subversion of economy and culture. They just often describe by the motion of a pendulum with its single point of inflection, and this would indicate that if something significant happened, then the tide changed. All of a sudden, wokeism, something happened. Oh, we're escaping wokeism. Unfortunately, this model doesn't accurately predict what we need to do or observe to escape from this deconstruction. Okay, so I'm going to bring up another diagram. This one is called a Minkowski plot or Minkowski diagram. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I did the science. And Hermann Minkowski was a mathematician. He lived from 1864 to 1909 and developed the concept of what we call Minkowski space-time. It's basically a combination of 3D Euclidean space with time to a 4-dimensional manifold. It sounds like a lot, right? And it turned out, in his words, most relevant, to be related to the special theory of relativity that Einstein created. Okay. Now let's finish with the science. I'm just going to say one more thing here. The Minkowski diagram shows how events relate to each other in terms of their inertial spaces of reference. And the point is, everything that could occur is in those cones. This is the shape is called a cone. There's the inside and the outside of the cone, and everything that could occur, like the present is right at the juncture, the future is one side, and the past is the other way. So everything that did occur is on one end of the cone, everything that could occur is on the other, and nothing is outside that cone. That's just the way the math shows it, okay? Now, why is that relevant? Well, I'll show you the connection right now. Let's call up another diagram here. Now this one, it's a little tougher to see. I put it in the upper corner and got rid of my Balrog picture. But you'll see the cone there, and you see 4 planes intersecting the cone, okay? And to form that parabola, which is a 2D shape, You take a plane, it's the first image, and you intersect the cone where the plane can only intersect one half of the cone, the upper part or the lower part, and you get a parabola. And remember I said the point of inflection right there is right there on the edge where the curve is, and all you can do is follow that narrow path one way or that narrow path the other. But that leaves a lot of like more possibilities that the people attempting to subvert our culture could be talking about. And the reason this is relevant, before I get to the next image, let me call up the web browser here. Okay. Hide the Minkowski and the parabola, the conic. Okay. So these two articles I linked below from Screenrant and from Cosmic Book News show that Doctor Strange had a massive drop-off on its second weekend, right? So some would say, well, the pendulum has swung. People have learned that they don't want to see Doctor Strange. Yet in 3 months we're getting Amazon's fake Lord of the Rings fan fiction garbage that craps all over Professor Tolkien's work. And I had an argument. I go back and forth on wanting to do a video about this. An incident on the Fellowship of Fans live stream roughly 2 weeks ago. I was arguing with someone in the chat, and I said to the point, Tolkien's work is an example of English culture. And he went on to say, well, no, he was talking about, just German culture. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about the content of his work. I'm talking about the work itself, okay? Tolkien's work there are tens of thousands of college classes on Tolkien's work. Not just Lord of the Rings, but Beowulf, the languages he created, other stuff he wrote, some poetry and things like that. He himself is one of the great authors of all time. Point of fact, the only author with 2 books in the top 5 is J.R.R. Tolkien, one of which has over 500 million copies and counting. The Lord of the Rings. Hobbit is, I think, around 300 or 400 million. The only books in history that have more provable printed copies is the Quran and the Catholic/Christian Bible. And that's it. Okay? And they're all well over 1 billion. So, I mean, Tolkien's not likely to catch them during our lifetimes. But he probably will. Because eventually we'll have trillions of people in space who might have religions that aren't Islam or Christianity. And there might be 10 trillion people reading Tolkien a half a million years from now. I know it sounds crazy. The point I'm making is the guy has established work that stands the test of time, an example of his particular culture. Okay? And Amazon is going to shit all over it. Okay? They're going to take a big dump. Thank God I'm not monetized, because this would certainly demonetize me. They're going to take a giant dump all over his work in about 3 months on the day of his death, the anniversary of his death. Okay? Now, and their justification is, well, he should have had more representation, blah blah blah. He's writing about the Germanic and Norse ancestors of the English people. He wasn't writing about China. And in fact, in his work, there are Asian and African peoples. He describes in his work where they live in the Far East and the east of the what we call ancient Europe and South. He describes those people in there. They are in the books, in the background, so to speak. Okay. Now, should we? I forgot who wrote Journey to the West offhand, but that's a legend. That's an equivalent work in Chinese cultural history. Not the content itself is too. It's amazing content, but just the impact that has had on Chinese and Asian cultures, and even out into the West. And if you don't know what that is, maybe you heard of Dragon Ball Z, Goku, Son Goku, the Monkey King. That's where his name comes from. Maybe you heard of Naruto. A homage to Dragon Ball and to Journey to the West. The four-tailed ape is named Son Goku, the Monkey King. Those are the obvious ones, okay? There have been more between movies, books, comics, TV shows, cartoons about Son Goku than any other character there ever has been. Even Jesus, like That's how in depth that journey to the West is in Asian, particularly Chinese, but Asian culture in general, and it's spreading to the world. The same way Professor Tolkien's work is spreading to the rest of the world. When Amazon put their travesty of a trailer of the trailer for their travesty out, okay, there were people like commenting in like I think some people told it was like Nigerian languages, and people like commenting in multiple Chinese dialects and multiple like Spanish and languages. I barely could kind of read a little of Spanish, a little bit of Italian, and I remember more of the Latin. That's as far as I can go with Latin, and a tiny touch of Greek. That's as far as I can go. And I've been told these people were railing on this because as much as we are, who are more European in ancestry, okay? And I'm an American of Italian descent with a little bit of Viking DNA and a little bit of Arab DNA, like 2% and 2% of me. That's my heritage. I'm not English in any way, or I have that 2% Viking, as I like to joke about, right? Because my ancestors are predominantly from Sicily and the Mediterranean, so it makes sense. Sailors would have interacted, plus the whole bit, whatever. And I recognize the work of Tolkien intellectually, leaving aside the personal impact it had on me, okay? So, let's circle back, okay, to what we're talking about. So these articles came out about Doctor Strange and the drop-off in that second week, which was about 65% roughly at the time for the article. I have two of them, one that was like right away and one was a few days later, so I can show that there was a slight miscalculation or whatever, and they'll both be linked below. And I'm not going to go through reading these with you because you guys probably read them already, okay? I want to get to the point I want to make before you guys think I'm just going to snap and go crazy and start screaming Amazon must die or some crazy crap like that, So let me put the browser back away. And we'll call our images back up, and we had our conic sections here, right? So, the reality here, now we're facing, as you've just heard me rant a bit about, is that the situation we're dealing with occurs in far more of a percentage of space-time of our lives that the simple mechanics of a parabola not only aren't something to be looked for hope that the tides have changed, but aren't enough to analyze the points of attack to deflect their attack. Because just as we're trying to make the change to get rid of this wokeism and its destruction, and I will say this again, and I don't want to get sidetracked, okay? If these people making this film had said outright, we're taking the token lives we're paying for, and we're targeting a particular audience of people who are interested in material that has been wokeified, I and probably 80% of Tolkien fans would have said, okay, not for us. If you think you want to spend your money on it, as long as you acknowledge it's not adherent to canon, it's trying to change what Tolkien wrote, and you're doing it for a particular audience, I think we all would have been okay with that. Not all, but 7%, in the concept that most of us are live and let live. We don't need grief. We don't go looking for grief, okay? We regardless of what we fight over in terms of politics, most of us who are not in the 20% of the far right or the 20% of the far left want to get along and try to compromise enough to have a functional society. Because what does it come down to? We want to work our jobs, buy our food so we can not die of starvation, pay for some sort of shelter, so we don't have to suffer from the extremities or be hunted by bears and stuff like that. Pay for things like the police and the military to protect us, and the fire department, and for health care so we don't deal with our health care problems and all that. And maybe if we have families, pay for them. And we're largely private people who like getting together for some fun, playing some games or watching some movies. That's what 90% of human beings want. And there's this small minority of people on both sides, and both sides are the wrong way to put it, because I'll do that in another video maybe. They're just going to be these small groups of people who, borrow a quote from the Nolan Batman films, who just want to see the world burn. And those people, it's very important to point out, they are a very good exploitable group of people for those who want to burn down the world and put something else there. And that is what is going on with Marvel, for example. And I'll make the point in a minute. That's what's going on. They're trying to take the 50 years of Marvel characters and the general conception of these characters and completely subvert them to something else and pretend that that was not only the way they really were meant to be, but that's better than what we read for 50 years or whatever. And they expect us to just pay for it. Like, they're not just making, Thor from Universe 612, who happens to be a woman. Marvel has like an infinite number of multiple realities. No. They're trying to say, this is, not only are you going to, like, all your Thors are ours now. We're going to burn your back issues. We're going to make it so that this is the only Thor you have. Or this is the only Captain America or whatever it is. It's a big enough fandom that people can have their niches. Comics especially designed that way. So they just want to replace and force you to comply with their way. Okay? Now, so let me pull up one last graph. Okay, so these are 3D quadrilateraloids. If I remember I'm long since past where I could nerd portal. If you happen to watch this, if I messed up, so calling. I think they're quadrataloids or something like that. There's 6 shapes. Okay, you can see one is called an elliptical paraboloid, another is a hyperbolic paraboloid. They're basically within those cones. Instead of a 2D shape, there are 3D shapes that take up more of that space-time, which means they have far more data points, far more points of inflection that not only can we use to push back against them, things we can, but when I say a point of inflection, I mean a decision of influence that we can make. Sometimes we can make individual ones, and our individual ones add up. Keep that in mind, what I'm about to show you, okay? But the point is, there's millions of these points. And one victory of having Doctor Strange drop off is nothing. Because the people trying to take this stuff away from us, to make our lives more miserable, and convince us that they're the same people making baby food, a baby formula almost non-existent, well, in short supply, let us say. They're the same people trying to convince you that grooming young children in schools, and I was a victim of that. Okay, I'm not 100% comfortable admitting it, but I'm like 90% comfortable. I was abused as a child. I'll put it that way, in school. Okay, so I'm glad I never had kids, because if what's going on in schools now, I could never send them there. I'd have to have my kids homeschooled or like military schooled with someone I would trust, type of situation. And point is, there are millions of these points of inflection, millions of pathways of attack, and maybe even more than millions. Okay, I mean, I could personally, if I spent nothing but the rest of my life writing these points of attack that is right now, I could probably bust a couple million easily. Okay, and they're all things like every single MCU movie, every single MCU TV show, this Amazoth crap with Rings of Power, this Amazoth travesty that they called Wheel of Time. Robert Jordan is probably rolling over in his grave and screaming that the Dark One has won. Okay, spoilers for the Wheel of Time. The very end of the book, of the last book, when Rand defeats the Dark One, not anyone else but Rand. Okay, with great help along the way from Egwene and Nynaeve and Moraine and his friends. The Dark One tempted Rand with versions of reality that were nightmares, but were still paradise for Rand. He would try to bribe him, and there was still better versions of reality than what was presented in his Wheel of Time garbage from Amazon. And other stuff. You hear about the attacks on animation, He-Man and Masters of the Universe. This was an 80s cartoon that kids enjoyed watching, could buy some action figures and smash up fighting them, and that was it. And it wasn't complicated. People like to say, oh, they're just selling toys. Well, guess what? Human beings, when we're young especially, and even when we're older, like toys. Now, I'm not saying I sit at my desk and have Godzilla and Mechagodzilla fight, but maybe I do. The point is, I like seeing these things. They remind me of fun times in my youth. And occasionally I'll move them around and post them a little. That's what adults do with toys. Little kids do the smash up. We know what we did when we were little kids. We watch other little kids do it. You know, and so there's nothing wrong with having cartoons to sell toys. Okay, there is something wrong with having cartoons to mind warp your children and on unrealistic scenarios. Sorry, I know this video is running long. Oh my God, it's really running long. I need to take a little sip here. But there are millions of these points of attack. And obviously I mentioned the cultural ones, the fandoms that I'm interested in. Think of the sports teams. I can't even say some of the name changes. I'll say they're the Washington team, or in real life, I'll say they're their old real name. The name that many American Indian teams on their own tribes use for their high school teams on their tribal lands. And I could find video after video of American Indians, the majority of them, when polled, love that these teams are named to honor their fighting spirit, to honor the memory of them. You know, I'm not saying all the names were great. There was some, but I mean, calling Washington the Redskins and Minnesota the Vikings means the same thing. Okay? It means the same thing. Yet why isn't anyone getting upset with the Minnesota Vikings name? Why don't we have to change them to the Minnesota Salamanders, It just boggles them into all these. It doesn't boggle the mind if you analyze it, because there are these millions and millions of points that you have to be aware of them. There's not one pendulum. There's not one, and you study them. And we all can't, as an individual, fight all the millions of them. Those of us doing videos like this are fighting the cultural battle with the fandoms. Some people fight out the sports battles, and we got to ally with the right people to push back, because the people trying to destroy what you love and what keeps you sane, and we fought our way up from the muck. 65 million years ago, mammals were like this. Is the size of the average size of a mammal when the dinosaurs were alive was about this big. They were basically food for the small predatory dinosaurs. That's all we were. Okay? And then a comet hit, or an asteroid at the Chicxulub crater, and wiped out the majority of living things on the Earth. And mammals rose up out of the muck and disaster and became the dominant life form on the planet. And then humans rose up, and we had no individuals. We were a bear, say 1 million or 2 million years ago, a bear or a lion or wolves or whatever. They effortlessly take humans for food. Humans found something. We could group. We can use, like other primates did. We can take advantage of that, and we can develop intelligence. We pull ourselves out of the muck to get to the point now, which is paradise. I mean, even some third world nations which have warlike states, a paradise compared to how humans were 1,000 years ago. Right? And they're trying to take it away. What we earned as a people to be able to enjoy our lives, like I said before, buy your food, pay your rent, have your family, enjoy your holidays, wherever the cultural ones are, marry a person you love, and yeah, we expanded that, and now we have gay marriage, as it were, which I'm fine with. I'm a libertarian. I don't think there should be any legal marriage. I think there should be a contract, but I don't want to get lost, okay? I want to get to my point. So, what ultimately am I going to point out here? Let me call one final thing up. Get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of that. Here we go. Now, I want to make this a little bigger, move it to the front. Okay. Let's look at this first tab first. So these are the approximately 33 or so films in the MCU so far. Right? So the first, I pulled this data from The Numbers, which is a website about movie data. I linked below. It's the best place to go now, to get this sort of stuff. At least I've found. And I have the phase it's in, the movie's in, the release date, the film name, and the percent total of drop-off from the first weekend to the second weekend. Okay? So those are the 4 columns. And this is a calculated percentage on my end, meaning I didn't want to spend for all these movies, and I have a lot more data I pulled. I didn't want to type in like 1,000 different percentages for every single week. So I just took the numbers and I calculated, you know. So my percentage, like if I have 62.23, the website might have 61.9 or something. It's within that variance of error, so it'll, you know. Now the second thing to notice here is there's for average, the first phase 1 average, phase 2 average, phase 3, phase 4 average, right? So notice that the first 3 phases, the percent drop off from the first weekend they were out to the second weekend, meaning if they made like $1 million on the first weekend and they made $500,000 the second weekend, that's a 50% drop. Let's keep it simple, right? So for the first phase, you got 55.59%. For the second phase, you got 53.23%. For the third phase, you got 54.21%. Okay? And notice almost all these percentages are not in the 60s. Okay? Phase 4, 63.82%. That's on average at least a 5% increase drop-off for all 5 of the movies in Phase 4. Now let's go to the next graph here, next the chart. This is the movies charted in order, right? And notice that there, I mean, I was going to put a trend line on here to show it, but I think it's fairly obvious, okay? These last 5 here are the last 5 movies that came out for the Phase 4 movies. Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, right? Notice something. 5 of the films, 5 films, right? 4 of them have over 60% drop-offs. 3 of them have almost 70%. The drop-off for Shang-Chi, the one that's not almost 70%, is 62.34%, is the highest drop-off rate for any higher than the drop-off rate for any of the films in the first 3 phases. So the outlier is Shang-Chi, and even then, Shang-Chi's in the middle of the pack for all when you look at all 20 whatever films. And the only reason Shang-Chi didn't have such a massive drop-off is because, unlike every other MCU film, Shang-Chi is a relatively minor character who had no presence. Like Black Widow is a minor character, but she had presence in all the other films, so she got a big opening weekend. You know, Shang-Chi is a relatively minor character, so he didn't get the big opening weekend boost. If Shang-Chi had been in previous films, he would have had a much higher opening weekend, and it probably would have had a 67% drop-off. I'm fairly certain that's a prediction. Okay. So, what do we have here? We have 4 general points to collect the data, the 4 phases, and the data that makes up each phase. So, instead of one pendulum, now we have a trend. We have a trend with just one set of data, okay? And that's just this one element, okay? I think if we're going to... I've ranted about this a bit. I'm going to skip this, what I was about to say. We need to keep gathering data, okay? We need to be looking at all of us out there. Hopefully some of you will listen to this at this point. Oh my God, I'm 33 minutes into this, right? If you still listen by now, thank you very much for listening to me, okay? We need, whatever area of the culture or the economy you're in, you need to be vigilant, okay? Because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, okay? You need to examine how your area is being attacked, pull some data out to monitor, so you can repel the attack, okay? We are repelling the attack with the Marvel Phase 4. There's a significant rise in the weekend drop-off, which means people aren't going back to see it again. People aren't saying, oh, this is great, I'm going to drag my girlfriend out there. Or parents aren't saying, okay, this is a great movie, it's safe for my kids, I'll take them next weekend. None of that's happening with these Phase 4 films. That's why the drop-off is there, okay? That's why all of them are dropping off like that. Sorry for the length of this video. I intended it to be much shorter, but it just got very ranty, and sorry for the rant. Comment down below if you have any questions for me about this video. Please share your thoughts. Share this video if you enjoyed it. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. I want to reiterate that. Subscribe for any more from me. My name is Matt. This has been a very lengthy Unbearable 73. Have a nice day, and I am out of here.